At this point, we have decided where each of the primary objects are, what their basic shape is, and roughly what color they are. Now we need to turn these simple shapes into complex three-dimensional forms using shading, color, and texture. There are numerous tools and techniques you can use to accomplish this. I will show you a variety of ways to paint so you can pick what works best for you. When shading, changing the value of a color to make it lighter or darker will get most of the job done. But you will also want to shift the hue and saturation of your colors for a more natural result. The Harmonies panel will make it easy to select a range of values, so let's make that accessible. The general rule for shading is to think about the light source. Where is it in the painting? How bright is it? What color is it? Is there more than one light source? Are there any reflective surfaces that might affect the lighting on objects? The light source in this painting is the sun located in the top left. Therefore, all of my shadows will be on the right side, and all of the highlights on the left. Then think about the form of the object you are shading. Is it a sphere, a cone, a cube, or a composite of many three-dimensional forms? My tree trunks and branches are conical or cylindrical forms. The large hill is spherical. The distant land is a flat plane. With this in mind, apply your lighting to the form logically. If my tree trunks are cylinders, I want the highlight to run along the left side of the trunks, and the shadows will be opposite to the light source on the right. If you don't have a good understanding of how light behaves on the basic forms, spend some time studying that subject. You probably have objects nearby you can use. For example, your stylus is a cylinder with a conical tip and a spherical eraser. All I need to do is point a light source at the left side, and I can get an idea of the direction and shape of the highlights and shadows. Currently, the flat colors of the land and water need the most attention. Once I add form to those, it will really begin to make this look more like a painting. I'll start with the easiest layer, the distant land. This is just a plane, like the side of a cube. It probably does have some variation, but since it's so far away, and we're viewing it almost straight on, it just appears as a flat surface. I'll enable Preserve Transparency, and I will use the digital airbrush to darken the bottom half of the plane slightly. This will give a sense of distance to the plane, similar to the gradient I used in the sky. Holding Shift will keep the stroke straight. I'll make the color an almost white, and use a small brush to paint near the top of the horizon. Next, I'll use the smooth palette knife to add in a few variations in color using a lighter version of the indigo shadow color. I'm using a fine diameter brush for this. These will be mostly horizontal strokes, but you can add a few vertical lines where the two layers meet. Let's add some detail to the grassy areas. I need to contour the underlying land first. I'll select the land foreground right layer and use the indigo shadow color from the distant trees to separate the foreground from the midground using the smooth palette knife. This brush will lay down fresh paint, and if you hold the pen down, eventually the paint runs out and the brush blends. Use this to fade your paint out and create a natural transition in color that has some brushwork to it. Use the contours of the brush to suggest the contours of the land. I'll darken the indigo color a bit and add some deeper shadows where the water meets the land. Use the shape of the dab to make vertical impressions of grass blades. I'll disable Preserve Transparency. I'll use Select Layer Content on the Land FG right layer, and I'll hide the selection. I'll select the Grass right layer. This is a thick paint layer, so I want to use thick paint compatible brushes with it. I'll select the Broken Paint brush in my thick paint category. I'll ensure that the knife break look is active. I'll sample my base color for the grass and make it a bit lighter using the Harmonies panel. By adding 31% visible depth, I can add some texture to the strokes. This brush is optimized for the Wacom Art Pen. Rotating your pen will rotate the flat dab. If your pen only supports tilt, you can edit the angle expression and set it to bearing. Lighter pressure will give you a more textured stroke. Try to start with light pressure and add more as needed. We will be adding several layers of texture here. Use the shape of the flat dab to suggest the contour of some of the distant grass and dirt. Use a smaller brush in the background and a larger brush in the foreground to give the illusion of perspective. I'll use some of the intermediate colors I created in the contours of the land. Next, I will pan to the HSY gamut and select the brownish color with the hue angle of 105. I'll lighten it a bit and ensure that it's only a bit darker using my grayscale preview. I'll repeat that by adding some of the other yellow and orange hues lightened a bit. Now add in more of the intermediate color. Light pressure will allow it to mix into the colors on the canvas. And last, we will use a darker brown to suggest some deeper shadow areas in the grass. I'll repeat this on the land FG left on the opposite side. Be sure to create the appropriate selection of the land each time you switch sides. Keep the paint off of the stream and use the eraser if you overpaint. Now I'd like to blend the textured paint into the base color using the Smooth Knife blender. In order to do this, I'll need to select both the land FG and the grass layers and merge them together. This will convert the thick paint layer to a default layer. It will no longer be editable as thick paint. With the selection still active, I'll use overlapping horizontal strokes with light to medium pressure to create some softer areas and merge the colors together. Don't blend all of your details away. Deselect and enable Preserve Transparency, then repeat this on the opposite side. Next, I'll disable Preserve Transparency, and I'll sample the darker snow color from the ground. I'll create a new thick paint layer with 31% visible depth above each of the land FG layers. I need not name these because they are temporary. I'll get a selection of the land and paint on the thick paint layers with the broken paint flat brush. And let's fade some of the snow into the grass texture on both sides of the land. These are areas of snow in between the grass. On the left side, I only want snow along the bottom edge where the land meets the water. Most of this land will be covered by tall grass. But on the right side, I want several distinct patches of snow. Make them larger in the foreground. In the background, use smaller features. I'll lower the scale of the simulated wood grain to around 200% to make the paper features smaller. On the right side, create some bare patches of snow that overlap the water edge. Next, I'll merge the snow layers with the land layers and blend some of it using the Smooth Knife blender. I'll deselect the active selection. Now let's add some details that look more like grass. For each side of the land, I'll create two new layers called Grass Texture and Grass Tinting. The latter will be set to the Color Composite method. Place these above the stream layer on the right side and below the bush on the left side. Here's a pro tip: duplicate blank layers if you need to use them in multiple groups. I can make short work of the grass by loading a fan brush with multiple colors. I'll select the image hose brush called Linear Size P and the fan dabs nozzle found in the Painterly library. I will make the brush size about the size of the grass in the foreground. Or in other words, the brush size defines the size of the grass. I'll start painting on the right side in the background with light pressure, and I will gradually fade to heavy pressure to scale the grass larger as it moves into the foreground. Keep the strokes horizontal on the right side. Cover the top edge of the land where it overlaps the water. Paint near the edges of the stream, but not inside of it. Use the eraser if necessary to clean up any stray grass. Short downward strokes with light pressure can make grass that is taller and less dense. And cover most of the land, but not all of it. Let some of the ground show through. Repeat this on the opposite side, but this time use angled strokes that follow the contour of the land. Slant the grass down toward the water. Don't leave as many gaps between the grass on the left side, but do leave the bottom edge exposed where it meets the water. Make sure the top is nice and filled in and the top edge is covered. It's okay that the grass is in grayscale, we will tint it. Before we do that, I want to enable Preserve Transparency and use the digital airbrush with a very light gray color to lighten the grass shadows on the top right of the land. This will help to give the land and grass some form. I'll disable Preserve Transparency now that I'm finished with it. Let's tint the grass the correct color by using Select Layer Content on the grass texture layers. and then select the grass tinting layers to paint on. I'll select the sponge brush, and I can paint with various desaturated brown, orange, and yellow colors to blend the grass textures into the ground colors. I'll also use a bit of the indigo shadow color throughout the grass. On the left side, I want there to be cooler colors near the left side of the land. Sample the darker indigo color from the distant hill, and use that to put in some even cooler grass in the top left. Then sample the snow from the ground and put a bit of that over the indigo and fade it into the warm colors. I want this to look like frosty grass that fades from cool to warm colors. Don't let the shadow colors in the background get too warm. Let's save an iteration of our progress. Next, let's add a bit of detail to the stream layer. I'll deselect any active selections and enable Preserve Transparency. I'll select an extra large digital airbrush. I'll sample the base color of the stream and increase the saturation to around 80 and the value to around 210. I'll fade in a few light spots in the middle. Then I'll sample the darker indigo color and use a slightly smaller brush to paint some of that below the trees in the foreground and the background. I'll sample some of the shoreline colors near the water and put those in as well. I'll disable Preserve Transparency now that I'm through with it. Next, I'll add some taller grass near the edge of the water. I'll create a new layer at the top of the Land FG Right group. I'll use the image hose brush called Linear Size P Angle B, which has the angle of the dab linked to the bearing or tilt of your pen. If your pen does not support tilt, you can go to the angle property and set it to 0 degrees to make the grass upright. I'll select the tall grass nozzle found in the nature library and scale the brush to be a bit taller than the other grass. Paint tall grass only near the edge of the water, taper the strokes, and use overlapping strokes that start in the background to maintain the perspective effect. You can fan the blades of grass out a bit by tilting your pen, but keep the grass upright for the most part. Leave some gaps between the grass and paint all the way along the shoreline into the background. Be careful not to paint onto the stream near the bottom edges. If you do, just use the eraser to clean that up. We don't need any of this on the left side of the land. We've seen how to add color to image hose nozzles, but how about making them lighter or darker? One way to do this is to paint the layer first, and then apply an adjust color filter to it. However, this affects the layer globally. What if you want more control over what areas get lightened and darkened? Here's where you can enable stroke attributes and select a composite method. Because this particular grass nozzle is rather dark, I'll select Screen to paint lighter strokes. Stroke attributes works by building up colors, so you'll need to paint directly onto the grass texture. If you're worried about messing up, you can either save an iteration before this step, or you can duplicate and hide the texture layer to use as a backup. Enabling Preserve Transparency will help to keep the details within the grass layer. By painting over the grass with a few quick strokes, I can lighten the blades here and there. I especially want to highlight the top edges and overlap them so they look like layers of grass. And again, be sure to make the background grass smaller than the foreground. You may need to make another pass to lighten the grass more. Preview your work in grayscale to help you blend the values together. It should look close to the first grass you painted, only a bit darker. Now, switch the stroke attributes merge mode to overlay and paint over the tall grass to darken some of the shadow areas. And to add deeper shadows in a few places, use the multiply merge mode. Let's name this layer Tall Grass, and let's tint it. I'll disable Preserve Transparency. I'll create a selection of the tall grass shape and create a new overlay layer above it. I'll name the layer Tall Grass Tint and hide the selection. I'll sample the brown from the HSY gamut that is at a hue angle of 104 with a saturation of 41. And I'll fill to tint the grass. To make it less uniform, I'll select the sponge and vary the grass color using browns from the HSY gamut. Use the darkest indigo color in the shadow areas of the tall grass to cool it down. This sponge can also use merge modes. I'll select the overlay mode and paint with grass colors to saturate the colors a bit with warm colors from the HSY gamut. Keep this concentrated in the foreground. We'll use the color merge mode with one of the medium indigo colors to cool off the grass in the distance. Use a bit of this in the foreground in the deepest shadow areas. Reduce the opacity of the tall grass tint layer if it is too strong. If the shadow colors in the background get too strong, you can use the digital airbrush with some of the light sky color to lighten and cool it off a bit. In the next video, we will continue adding details to the bush and distant tree line. That's coming up next.